Hello, and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we are recording this episode of the podcast while we wait for the Queen's telegram to help us celebrate our 100th episode.
100 episodes.
I can't believe we've done so many, but then also I'm like, that makes so much sense because we've talked about the royals every day for so long.
Yeah, it's been like 2 years since we started doing this. Thank you if you've been around for that long or more recently.
Yeah, or some of you who started recently but went back to the beginning.
I couldn't do that. I don't want to hear how bad our audio quality was. Or even worse, that it just hasn't improved at all.
I don't know what would be worse, yeah. But it has been really fun preparing a special episode.
Yeah, we have done a little bit on abolishing the monarchy, but before we get into all that, there are a couple of topical stories I wanted to talk about because Prince William and Kate Middleton were back to work this week following the death of Prince Philip.
So Kate has been given special permission by the Queen to honour Philip's memory by visiting the Air Cadets in East London, and Will went along with her as well.
The second time this has happened where she was meant to have like a solo engagement and he joined her. Philip served as Air Commodore-in-Chief of the Air Training Corps for 63 years, but in 2015 he passed this patronage, a military patronage, to Kate, who is known as Honorary Air Commandant because of her civilian background.
The big moment from their visit was when they were invited to go on the Grog Tutor flight simulator, and Will suggested that Kate give it a go.
Yeah, and he had a great little one-liner. He said, "I'll hold the handbag."
The future king holding a handbag.
Holding a clutch. This line was used everywhere. This was the headline for so many stories about this. And I noticed as well that a lot of media outlets commented on how this stupid joke and just this general series of events was a sign of how much royal engagements have changed since Prince Philip's era, that now the lady is going in the cockpit instead of the man.
How times have changed, but also in a way they haven't, because I was really reminded of our very first episode when, by the way, we're not going to be doing this all episode being like, this reminds me, right back in the beginning. But in our first episode, we talked about how the Queen was shown how to use a self-service checkout in Sainsbury's. And I just love these pictures of royals with technology.
Love technology. Another striking detail from this engagement was what they wore. Will wore a black tie mourning Prince Philip, and Kate also honoured Philip's history of racism with a very touching coat dress by Dolce & Gabbana.
I can't believe she still wears Dolce & Gabbana. She's worn them all throughout the racism scandal that's engulfed them.
And she'll continue to wear them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a lovely tribute to that great man.
Well, speaking of great men, our little man, Louis.
Our little bloke has turned 3.
And he's frankly unrecognisable.
I know, I thought it was George. This tells you how much attention I pay to pictures of kids. But when you showed me the picture, we got a new portrait of Prince Louis for his birthday on Friday of him riding a bicycle, wearing shorts, and no helmet. Pictures taken by Kate.
But we also got some pap photos of Meghan and Archie at the same time.
The dueling baby pics.
Yeah.
This week. These photos showed Meghan carrying Archie out and about somewhere in California. I don't know if it even said if it was Los Angeles or Montecito.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have a lot of questions about these paparazzi photos. Lainey Gossip had quite an interesting breakdown about this, and she pointed out that the agency didn't provide details on when or where these pictures were taken, which would mean a number of things. You know, one, they may have been taken recently and possibly staged intended as a sort of petty move to overshadow Prince Louis's birthday photos, or 2, they are older photos and the agency has been holding on to them for a while until this kind of opportune moment, or that the agency wanted to avoid giving any identifying location details to prevent any other agencies from kind of blowing up their spot and tracking the Sussexes down.
Mm. We know that Harry and Meghan have previously sued a paparazzi agency, and it remains obviously to be seen whether they're going to do that. Here it's too soon to tell with these photos.
You know, you can have complicated feelings about this. Like, these are very clear images after many months without any paparazzi photos of Meghan, and people fucking love photos of Archie. Yeah. So that obviously works in Harry and Meghan's favour. But at the same time, and I think you as well, find it hard to believe that they would hand this exclusive to Page 6 rather than People magazine or something like that.
Yeah, that was the sticking point for me, because Page 6 is owned by Rupert Murdoch. So these guys are kind of enemies, and I would be very surprised if it turned out that the Sussexes were granting them access to these photos.
Well, we don't know. Yeah. And in the meantime, you know, very cute pictures.
Yeah.
Meghan looked great. It was very fun to see Archie wearing jeans. Yes. Very unroyal jeans.
So Meghan as well.
With the beanie and everything. Also, Prince Harry left the UK on Monday night. There was all kinds of conflicting press reports around how long he would be staying. Would he be staying for the Queen's birthday? How long was he going to be sticking around for? But he arrived back in California on Tuesday, and the following day we learned from another Page 6 exclusive that he was seen dining with Wallace Annenberg, who is a very high-profile LA-based philanthropist, at a super exclusive Hollywood club, which I think is pronounced San Vicente Bungalows.
It sounds very exclusive and posh.
Not so exclusive that there aren't people leaking to Page 6, though.
Yeah.
The report also noted that the owner is crazed and trying to figure out how the privacy policy has been breached. Prince Harry, yet again, having to deal with leaks after leaving one leaky institution of the monarchy for the leaky institution of Hollywood, baby.
Yeah, it sounds like possibly heads will roll if they find out where these leaks came from.
We'll see.
But I know you guys aren't here to hear us talking about royal babies. You want to know, how the hell are we going to bloody abolish this monarchy?
We have tried to put together a sort of how-to guide answering the kind of questions that we have about what it might look like if the monarchy was to be abolished. Obviously, we are not experts.
No.
So we have been relying on a variety of sources to try and make sense of this. So we're going to do our best here. And some of it is just going to be our own speculation as well.
We'll try and be clear when we're just speaking out of our asses. So I suppose the first question is, who decides that the monarchy is done?
Yes.
And royal author Marlene Koenig told Insider that it would take legislation, an act of parliament, signed by the sovereign to end the monarchy. And Republic, the anti-monarchy group in the UK, said the move will only be made once MPs and the public agree to it, although politicians only have to agree to a referendum and let the voters decide the rest.
In terms of whether it could happen, the UK did get rid of the monarchy once before. Following the Civil War, Parliament impeached and executed Charles I in 1648.
Not exactly recent history.
And you guys had the Commonwealth of England, but after Oliver Cromwell's death in 1658, his son wasn't really that interested in the Lord Protector, the sort of military dictator job. And in all of this leaderless confusion, the monarchy was reinstated in 1660.
So that might not be the best blueprint to follow. And kind of, we'll talk a little bit about other countries that have got rid of their monarchies, and it's often quite a violent process. Although, as we said, now you can do it by referendum, and we would imagine that it would be more bloodless in the UK now. But newspaper noted that many monarchies have turned into republics by getting out from under the thumb of a foreign monarch. The governments of Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Malawi, Uganda, Guyana, Gambia, Malta, Sri Lanka, Trinidad and Tobago, Fiji and Mauritius have all shown their queens the door too. Each time, her name was Elizabeth II. So it wouldn't even be the first time for it to happen to the Queen.
I think it might sting a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But I think, in terms of looking at why would it happen, I think we both agree that it's obviously not going to happen during the Queen's lifetime. Yeah. But it would probably need to be something very big. Some of the things that have toppled monarchies in the past have included being friends with fascists.
That was the case in Italy when the last king, Victor Emmanuel III, enabled Mussolini's fascist regime and legalised the persecution of Jews. And then after the Second World War, when Italy voted to become a republic, he was exiled and lived in Egypt until he died a year later.
Another possible reason could be communism. Unlikely, but possible.
Yeah, that was the case in Bulgaria, where the monarchy was abolished 2 years after a communist coup.
In 1946.
Yeah. Again, you can see both of these things happen after a massive period of turmoil, i.e. the Second World War. So I suppose you kind of need everything to be changing almost at the same time in order for people to really start considering whether the monarchy can be got rid of. But also, not just communism that could uproot it, right-wing military dictatorship can also do the trick. There was the Greek military junta of the 60s and 70s, which tried to revive popular support by holding a referendum on abolishing the monarchy. And this was the second time they abolished the monarchy in Greece. They'd already done it before in 1924, but this time was when it stuck. But it would be interesting to see what the royals would actually have to do in order to turn the majority of the country against them.
Yeah, or not even turn it against them, but turn people against the institution of monarchy. Because, we've obviously had a lot of personal, very unflattering stories about them, from Charles and Diana to Prince Andrew and Epstein more recently, or, even the professional examples like Prince Andrew's very dodgy deals or the Queen influencing legislation. But as well as that, there's been the Harry and Meghan drama of the last few months, which has sort of cast a light on the values of this family, who are meant to represent the best qualities of the British people. And you kind of wonder, how extreme does it need to be before it could trigger a serious shift in people's mindset? Because there has just recently been this huge change in the UK with Brexit, it's unlikely that British people are going to have any kind of appetite for another huge change like that anytime soon. Yeah. So it would need to be something quite major, I think, to kick that into action.
And certainly, like you're saying, it's unlikely to be in the Queen's lifetime, because she represents stability to so many people, especially after something like Brexit. So, maybe just changing over to Charles as king would be a big enough kind of shake-up for people, but I sort of doubt it, because even people's personal dislike of Charles, I don't think, extends to the institution.
I wonder, would it have to be something with political implications, or something to do with gross misappropriation of funds, or something like that doesn't have a kind of as much of a moral element as, a sex scandal.
Yeah, I even think that the financial stuff might not be enough, because we've heard tell of kind of Andrew's dodgy deals and stuff like that. I think it would have to be something like, all of the kind of powers that the monarch has that, supposedly don't get used. If someone like Charles or Will started to use these kind of things, and it kind of opened people's eyes to like, oh, actually one person shouldn't be able to do all of these kind of things. I think it would have to be something like that just, like you say, like exposes the problems with the institution and that position.
And I do think it would have to be someone in the direct line of succession, like one of the heirs. Andrew's kind of easy to write off as a bad apple.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be Charles or Will.
Yeah.
So what are the steps? How do we abolish the monarchy?
So, again, referring to Republic, they say a law is passed by MPs allowing for a referendum, and voters then get to decide if they want to make the change. If the voters vote yes, then a date is set for the election of the head of state and the introduction of new rules that will govern the reformed political system, which will be in the form of a new constitution. As part of this process, Parliament passes the crown to the people, which means that crown properties such as the crown estate remain with the nation rather than going with the ex-royals.
And on a date a few days or weeks after the election, the new head of state would then be sworn in and the new constitution would take effect and the monarch would retire from office.
Huzzah! But the monarch would still rule over 15 other countries. So Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Jamaica, Barbados, the Bahamas, Grenada, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Belize, Antigua, and St. Kitts and Nevis. So these are the countries that would then also have to legislate to remove the monarch and follow the UK in abolishing the monarchy.
Yeah, it wouldn't automatically remove the monarch from these other countries, but they probably would just follow suit without much great incident. After that, we would then get our much longed for elected head of state.
Yeah, so we'd have a president, but I guess there are a lot of different kinds of president. It would seem to me that they would follow something probably kind of similar to what you have in Ireland, where you have a ceremonial president and then you have a prime minister or a Taoiseach.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it would be more like the Irish model than the American model, for example. I know we were talking with some of our friends today about who in the UK do we think would possibly run for president.
Yeah.
The kind of people that we thought of were like Stephen Fry, Alan Sugar, maybe Tony Blair. Like, none of these are sounding very attractive options, but we were just trying to think of who it might be. If you guys have any ideas, let us know.
Yeah, maybe like...
Oh, Charles.
Yeah, Charles probably. Would we get someone like Maggie Smith?
She is not arsed to do that. But possibly Glenda Jackson or someone, you know, somebody who has a history in politics.
Meghan.
She doesn't even have citizenship, Tom.
Yeah.
Kate? Okay, so getting into the sort of nitty-gritty here. What would happen to the government, to the justice system, to military structures?
Well, I think any law that refers to the crown or the monarch would be dealt with by the same law that sets up the referendum, according to Republic. So you wouldn't need to go through all the laws and amend them one by one to say, to remove any mention of the crown or Her Majesty the Queen or whatever it is. Basically, the monarch would be replaced by the head of state, I suppose. So that would be probably fairly straightforward. And actually laws would be able to be passed quicker in theory because they wouldn't have to go through the Queen's consent or the royal assent procedures, which add like a couple of weeks onto the process.
I had a quote from Graham Smith, who said that in addition to electing a head of state as part of the monarchy's abolition, Parliament itself would have to change. And in a republic, you would have to get rid of the House of Lords and replace it with another house, one that's democratic, perhaps called the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the UK would still want to keep the, like, two houses form of government, but, yeah, move to something like in America with the representatives versus the Senate would probably be a good template to follow.
Yeah, and in terms of the titles given by the monarch, you know, the House of Lords would be gone, and although it is quite hard to find any information on it, I think we can speculate a little bit about what might happen to all of those viscounts and marchionesses.
Yeah, like the kind of lower down titles especially. Like, these titles don't come with money or entitlement to a certain property. And you, just to be clear, being a duke, for example, is different from having a duchy. Like, a duchy, like the duchies of Cornwall and Lancaster, are estates, whereas, say, being the Duke of Sussex doesn't actually entitle you to any land in Sussex.
Yeah.
So they are just words, they're just names, and it's pretty likely that they'll just stop being recognised by the state. I suppose they could keep using them if they wanted to amongst themselves, if it makes them feel better, but I suppose that doesn't really change anything, because I do think that these titles are mainly used just to decide who sits where at, like, posh dinners and stuff. And, you know, I think that these people will still do the same thing.
Yeah, but you would hope that because they pass on from generation to generation over time, it would just kind of fade and people might think, oh, it's actually really naff that you keep using that title. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that pass down, I think they even, like, get diluted. Like, they become less important ones the further down you go. And without the Queen or a monarch to be creating new ones or awarding people, they'd probably get wiped out fairly quickly anyway. So that would be good.
I was interested in what might happen to the Church of England. The Eye reported that the Anglican Church would have to figure out who runs it, because the Queen, or whoever is the monarch, is the supreme governor of the Church of England. So the person in charge could be the church's most senior bishop, the Archbishop of Canterbury, or the church could ask the former monarch to stay on, which the Eye says could be a convenient backdoor that would allow the royals to preserve a modicum of their special status and allow devout Anglicans to feel like they still have a king or queen.
That's really interesting, I think, because I mean, I don't know a lot of people who are devoutly Anglican. I think that the Church of England doesn't really lend itself to people being particularly vocal about their beliefs. But I just don't think I've met someone who actively considers the Queen to be their religious leader. And it would make a lot of sense for the Archbishop of Canterbury to become the head of the church, because I feel like most people assume he is anyway. But I guess this idea of it being like a concession to the royals is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, allow them to save face. I was, obviously, as a graphic designer, very interested in what would happen to the money and stamps and whether there might be a job opening there. But according to Republic, there's actually no extra cost in redesigning stamps and coins, unlike some people would claim. Currency that's in circulation with the Queen's head would still be legal, just as it would be, you know, when Charles becomes king. It doesn't suddenly mean all of your pink grannies and brown grannies are no longer legal tender.
If Charles becomes king.
They just get phased out, you know, and banknotes are often being redesigned. They're definitely always being replaced anyway. So
yeah, they've probably had designs with, like, Charles on them for decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
At this point.
And also I was thinking, by the time this happens, we're going to probably be even more cashless than we are now. So,
well, stamps as well is the other thing.
Yeah, and now we can always have, like, Christmas stamps that have, like, nice designs on them and things like that.
Or, like, the Star Wars stamps.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the new stamp, I think, of the UK.
Darth Vader. The main thing that you guys seem to be interested in was to do with the property and what would happen to the royal collection, the crown estates, the crown jewels, the palaces, all of that. So I think we can go through this kind of one by one. In terms of the sort of property, like buildings and things like that, Vice reports that we would have to firstly sort out who gets the palace's tangible assets. In 2017, Brand Finance estimated these to be worth £25.5 billion. Confusingly, the crown is not technically public property nor private property of the royal family. Despite the puzzling legalities around who owns what, if the history books are anything to go by, most of the assets would be funneled directly to the state treasury, with the Windsors retaining only what is deemed to be their personal property, which still amounts to millions. So it's not a bad redundancy package.
Yeah, I feel like owning the crown estate kind of means you have to fund the government in its entirety. I mean, that's what it was originally for. The monarch owned all this land, and they used the taxes and rents and all that from that land to fund the government in peacetime. Obviously, in war, it was slightly different. But they put an end to that, like, hundreds of years ago, and that's why we got the civil list, which became the sovereign grant. So that's not their private property anymore, so it would revert to the state properly.
In terms of the palaces, there are the palaces that belong to the nation: Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, St James's Palace and Kensington Palace. So they would all remain national property, as they are now. But the Windsors would get to keep their private properties. So that's Balmoral and Sandringham Estate.
We were talking a lot about the Duchy of Cornwall and trying to work out what might happen with that, because it seems like the Duchy of Cornwall, which is Charles's private estate, is a private estate and owned by him. So it would seem that he would be allowed to keep it. But in 2012, Republic launched a campaign to abolish the duchy, and Graham Smith said at the time, "There is no reason why this arrangement should carry on. It's essentially public money that profits from the duchy, which is going into Charles's pocket, and it's not appropriate that the duchy then give him considerable personal influence with no control or accountability over that influence."
Yeah, so I guess that means that abolishing the monarchy wouldn't mean abolishing the duchy, that would require a separate process.
But the kind of public feeling that would lead to the monarchy being abolished would probably carry through to getting rid of stuff like the duchies.
Yeah, I think in those kind of circumstances, the line is a little bit harder to draw, and it will depend, like you say, on the manner in which the royals are removed from office.
Yeah, in Germany, after World War One, when the Kaiser abdicated, some of the stuff was confiscated and other things he got compensated for. So there could be a system like that with the royals, where there are certain things that are kind of absolutely go straight to the state, and then other things where it's like, it will look really bad if you keep all this stuff, but we know that maybe technically it doesn't belong to us. Can we reach some kind of agreement whereby we can all save face?
Yeah.
I think there would be a lot of that, personally. I do also wonder if they would have to pay all the inheritance tax that they've avoided on these private properties.
I think that, again, probably depends on how hostile the environment is at that point. Talk to me about clothes and jewellery.
There is probably going to be quite a lot of debate over what items are the royals' personal property and what things are held in trust for the nation or kind of belong to the crown in a more abstract sense. So it's been compared to kind of like the legal wrangling after a divorce, a sort of protracted court battle that would determine what happens to each item almost. And as we keep saying, like, it depends on what the situation is, what the feeling is at the time, I think. I don't think the government want to be seen as swooping in and taking private property away from people who would now be private citizens.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are bound to be things that have come into royal possession by questionable means, to say the least, and also things which may be of, like, great historical importance that should be put in museums. Maybe a whole load of collections would be set up.
Yeah, and I was interested in, like, what would happen to the clothes in particular, like Kate's outfits, for instance. What happens to those?
One of the things I was actually surprised by, because I was like, oh, we'll start looking at Kate's wedding dress as like a big piece of historical royal dress that could be considered something that should belong to the nation, perhaps. But actually, it seems that the Middletons paid for that dress. All £250,000 of it. So we're not getting our hands on that. That's staying in Bucklebury.
Property of property pieces.
Yeah.
When we read that book, Not in Front of the Corgis by Brian Hoey, he mentioned that the Queen will give her old clothes as hand-me-downs to her staff, or in some cases sell them off, removing the labels or any other identifying details, and then selling them through like secondhand shops or whatever. And I know Paul Burrell has said as well that Diana would sell her old clothes, and I guess that, you know, suggests that they are private property, so that it's possible that if the monarchy was to be abolished, that the rest of the royals would do stuff like that too. I think it's probably more likely, particularly in Kate's case and maybe Princess Anne, if she's still around, that they might donate items to the V&A or another national museum or something like that.
Yeah.
Or that they might auction them off for charity or something, particularly if they are in need of some positive press coverage.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because, I mean, obviously, a lot of it will be paid for by the taxpayer, but some of that will be through, I guess, their salaries in effect. And that doesn't mean that we can just go to any government employee and say, like, those jeans belong to me.
Yes.
So, and, you know, I don't think anyone's going to be quibbling over stuff like that, but it is these big historic pieces. And honestly, if there's not likely to be any grand balls and openings of Parliament and stuff, you know, what are they going to be doing with the dresses? Probably not very much. It's obviously different when you talk about the crown jewels and the big jewellery collection, though.
Yeah, those are only owned by the Queen in the right of the crown, so we can presume that they would revert to the state. But in general, with the royal collection, because I know a lot of people had questions about the looted items, or what would happen to the antiquities or the cultural artefacts, like would they be returned? And to start with the royal collection, we've said before that it's not owned personally by the Queen, but it's held in trust by her as sovereign. I found this report in The Guardian that was really interesting in 2002, and it said, the Treasury's long-held viewpoint is that the crown jewels, for example, are non-surrendered crown property, which are vested in the sovereign and cannot be alienated. However, the Duke of Edinburgh, in a TV interview in 2000, spoke about the Royal Collection's masterpieces and said that the Queen is technically perfectly at liberty to sell them, a viewpoint seemingly at odds with the inalienable, namely non-transferable status of the collection preferred by others. And this report said that the confusion is compounded by a statement that was given by the then Lord Chamberlain, Lord Cobble, to a select committee in 1971, in which he said that the royal collection is made up of items purchased or acquired by all sovereigns up to the death of Queen Victoria, which seems to imply that jewellery and art bought by or gifted to monarchs since 1901 are part of their private wealth.
It's all very messy, and I think that it all depends who in the royal family wants to fight these battles, because it's gonna cost a lot of money and look really bad if you're fighting to keep a hold of looted treasure, basically.
I think probably the most likely thing that would happen if the monarchy were to be abolished is that this collection would become officially state-owned, so that its trustees would be answerable to Parliament, which is the case with the collection held by the British Museum. And in the case of the British Museum's items, the government has final say over particularly items with controversial provenance, such as the Parthenon marbles. But for now, it can't officially decide the fate of more controversial crown assets, such as the Kohinoor diamond, which we've talked before about. But national institutions, including the British Museum and the V&A, are prevented from permanently returning looted items by what's called the British Museum Act of 1963 and the Heritage Act of 1983. So at the moment, we're seeing more organisations and museums in the UK, like the Horniman and a few others, who are returning items like the Ben and Bronzes. So there is this burgeoning movement to return items, and in particular, in the case of the British Museum, to remove those legal restrictions. And that might end up happening sooner than the abolition of the monarchy, but if not, it's likely that the future state-owned royal collection would be bound by those legal constraints as well.
Just getting rid of the royals won't suddenly make the UK like, oh, let's give back everything that we've stolen. You know, unfortunately.
In terms of the private collection, it's even more complicated, because we talked a few weeks ago about a Guardian report that found police have been barred from searching the Queen's private estates for stolen or looted artefacts after ministers granted her a personal exemption in 2017 from a law that protects the world's cultural property.
Yeah, that was a very obvious ploy to abuse the power, as far as we could tell.
In 2015, though, a painting in the Dutch royal collection was identified as Nazi loot.
That's not a good look.
I don't think it would be terribly surprising if the British royals had items with similarly unsavoury origins in their collection.
Yeah.
I would imagine, just my own personal speculation, that if the monarchy were abolished, those kind of personal exemptions that were applied to the Queen would be overruled.
Yeah, you'd think so. It would be very weird to have her as just an ordinary private citizen with all these special privileges.
Or a former head of state who gets to enjoy the privileges that they're no longer entitled to.
But a big question that I hadn't even considered until we started looking into this is, what would the country actually be called without the monarchy? Because obviously it's called the United Kingdom.
I think people would keep calling it the UK.
Yeah.
That would have to die out over time.
Yeah, and I think an alternative the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland would probably be an obvious one. It's not as catchy. I also kind of feel that it's possible that the abolition of the monarchy would either be the result of or the instigation for Scottish independence and possibly a unified Ireland. So maybe we don't really need to lose too much sleep over what the United Kingdom will be called after, because maybe we'll just be England by the end of it. And obviously the national anthem would have to be scrapped. Who would you get to write the new national anthem?
Dua Lipa.
I was going to say Cheryl Cole. But maybe they could do it together.
With Elton John.
We get him to sing it, definitely. But in this crazy post-monarchy world, what does life look like for the ex-royals?
This is something we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
I think this would probably happen after the Queen's death, but if not, she'd probably just, retire.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be interesting to look at some other examples of what has happened in other countries where the monarchy has been abolished, like Bulgaria, for instance.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier Bulgaria. There was a communist coup which led to the abolition of the monarchy. And Simeon Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, who was the last king, he was king until he was 9 years old, and then the monarchy was abolished in 1946. He lived in exile for a while, but he returned to Bulgaria in 2001, formed his own political party, and then was elected prime minister. So he got back up there, really, didn't he?
55 years later, but yeah.
Because you could imagine Charles wanting to do something similar.
Definitely.
I think, time isn't on his side in the same way it was for the 9-year-old ex-king. And I think you do need a period of time like that between abolishing the monarchy and then electing a former royal to head of state.
Yes.
But he would love to be an elected official.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It would do wonders for his ego.
I think, though, with those kind of older generation of royals, they're all basically retirement age anyway. And I think it's much more interesting in the case of the younger royals. I know this has been the subject of our own fan fiction plots of what they might do. But I think Harry and Meghan have set a pretty good precedent that could be followed by Will and Kate if they wanted. Certainly on the charity side, if not setting up a production company. But I think for Will, he would probably end up in a corporate role, like a seat on a board somewhere, I can imagine would suit him well. Something that's not hugely demanding.
Yeah, probably still with the opportunity to open things.
Give speeches, schmooze.
Yeah, a lot of schmoozing. Kate would be such a good mummy blogger, mumfluencer.
Is that a word?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But that depends, obviously, when this happens. If the kids are all grown up, maybe that won't be quite the vibe she's going for. But I was thinking that her work with the National Portrait Gallery on the Hold Still photography competition could be kind of a template for the kind of stuff she could get involved with if she wanted to continue working with young people and encouraging creativity and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think as well it would be possible that she might even return to her pre-marriage roots in fashion when she used to work in Jigsaw. I know Princess Marie Chantal of Greece is the founder and creative director of a luxury children's wear company.
Yeah.
And I could see possibly Kate doing something similar, sort of like Samantha Cameron, maybe.
Yeah. I feel
quite
like people...
hands off, but
I feel like people would go mad for it.
Yeah, like, it would be a huge money spinner for sure.
They're obsessed with what she wears and what the kids wear, so that would be a real no-brainer.
Easy money. What about the kids, the Cambridge kids?
Well, the world is their oyster, really. There's a lot of variety already in terms of either low-level royals or former royals around the world. Like Prince Nikolai of Denmark, who is a full-time model. So
Okay.
George could do that, maybe. You have Prince Philippos of Greece and Denmark, who is a financial analyst. Very different. Still a possibility for an ex-royal. But even King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands, he served as a first officer on KLM flights. And he did it for 21 years, even after he had acceded to the throne. So that is a great role for one of the Cambridge kids, I think.
I think the difference with the British royals, obviously, is that they are much higher profile than any of these other European royals.
Yeah.
They are going to be subject to global attention. Certainly Kate and Will for the rest of their lives. Probably George and Charlotte and Louis to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think the options available to them might be a little bit different. You know, they probably won't be able to like go be a yoga instructor somewhere and be totally off the grid. But maybe they will. You know, it's sort of harder to predict in their case because they have that sort of household name A-list status that the rest of the European royals don't.
Yeah, and I could see that, you know, good roles for them would be ones that really cash in on that. Like, I was thinking, kind of as a joke, like, they'd probably get work experience at Casamigos out of Jack Brooks' bank. But I do think that kind of brand ambassador type job is, like, tailor-made for the Cambridge kids or young royals.
Yeah, or being the face of some kind of corporate body like Prince Harry is doing.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fascinating to watch. And I hope it happens in my lifetime.
Yeah, I really hope so. I kind of became a bit hopeless reading about it. And I was like, will we ever get to a point where enough people in this country want to get rid of them that we can achieve it?
I actually felt more hopeful than you.
Yeah.
Because I do think, obviously, it will be very difficult for something to precipitate the desire to abolish the monarchy, but actually talking through it, it felt like the steps it would take to abolish the monarchy are fairly straightforward. And I think if more people knew that and didn't just have it as this sort of foggy idea, like, oh, it would be so impossible to untangle all of that, what a nightmare. Actually, no. It would be pretty direct.
Yeah.
And I think if more people knew that, then they might be more open to the possibility.
So share this episode with everyone that you know and spread the knowledge. I would be absolutely gutted if we weren't able to do an episode of Airheads about it. Like, if we missed out on doing the Monarchy Has Fallen episode.
When we're 80 and finally do.
Getting out this shit microphone. Everyone being like, you know, the microphone on your phone is way better than that. But looking to the more immediate future.
Yes, this week is the 10th anniversary of the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton.
Hard to believe it's 10 years.
So Tom and I think we've said before, we've never watched their wedding. It's like 3.5 hours long, I think. So we're going to try and watch it this week.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be honest, if it's boring, I'm not going to watch the whole thing. But we will watch as much of it as we can. And we will be talking about All Things Will and Kate next week.
Yeah, which is rare for us.
Presumably they'll do something to mark the anniversary, release new photos or something, so we'll be talking about that. If there are any moments from the wedding or indeed from their 10-year marriage, you know, obviously we've only been doing this podcast for 2 years, so if there's anything from the early years of their marriage, any particular stories that you think are particularly juicy or funny or whatever, please let us know, and we'll put all those together and talk about that next week.
Yes, and in the meantime, we hope you all have a great week.
Thank you so much for listening now and for the 100 episodes up to now.
And I hope you join us in saying, Abolish the monarchy! Bye!
Bye!